Okay, welcome everybody. My name's Cameron with DevFacto. I've gone ahead and created another presentation, so just making a video of this. So today's presentation is on WPF templating. So this all started when I was doing a lot of work in WPF. I was actually making a job tracking system. And so as I was kind of going through, I'm learning WPF. This was my first big WPF project. I had seen some stuff with Silverlight and done some of that before. But this was, was a bigger application than before, bigger than anything I'd done in WPF so far. And so I just wanted to kind of take some of the time out and just run through some of the basic lessons that I kind of wish that I had known when I was starting the project. I think it would have made my experience learning how to template easier. And the reason that I feel it's important to make it as easy as possible to learn about templating is because it's a very powerful tool in your WPF toolbox that can really make the difference between a good application and a great application in WPF. So it's very powerful, lots of great stuff. If you combine this with the MVVM design pattern, it really makes things snappy, and and I've just really come to enjoy templating. But there's always that hump, so hopefully this kind of helps you guys out. So by the end of this presentation, I'm kind of hoping that you guys will have a basic understanding of templates. You will have just a general idea how to make your own one, but more so it's just, you kind of know some of the things that you should know when you start approaching templating. You just know that they're there, and now you can go and research them on your own, and you have kind of an idea of where you're going. So that's all I'm hoping for. Okay, so to start over, we'll just go over an overview of what's going to be covered in this. We're going to go over what templates are, what they look like, what they mean, stuff like that. We'll go over some default templates, how to find them, how to deal with them, and whatnot. Then what we'll do is we'll go over template composition. And so this just means how do you build a complex template, yet keep it simple, keep it from becoming this gigantic monolith of a template that will just confuse you and make things longer and harder for you. We're going to go over triggers and how they can provide some action and provide some dynamicism, I guess if that's even a real word, to your templates and also your controls and whatnot. And then we'll just go over custom templates. So I've kind of provided a little diagram here of how I kind of think they all fit together. Okay, so what are templates? So, we'll just go over a real quick idea of templates. And really all that is just a XAML description of an object. Now, when I say a XAML description, if you're familiar with XAML, you know that it's usually associated with the UI portion of a control. So control will have some code behind. Let's say a standard Microsoft user control, the button, for example. You're going to have a bunch of code behind that will control behavior. It will control how the button works, how it interacts with the system, what kind of properties it has, etc. But the button also is going to have a template on it. And this button template is going to basically give the visual tree for an object and tell the object this is how you render yourself visually in WPF. So button is derived from control, so we give button a bunch of behaviors in the code behind, and then we have basically how the visual tree works. And so the template is what tells the control this is how you render. And so a template is just a XAML description or a description of how its visual tree looks and whatnot. It tells the template this is how you render. So templates are a quick way to customize controls. And by this I mean, in the old days, or at least when I used to have to, do this kind of stuff pre-WPF templating, I would usually have to create a control on my own. So if I wanted, let's say a text box, but I wanted it to be slightly different, let's say I wanted to have some sort of background gradient or something that wasn't kind of out of the box in WPF, I would have to create my own control, and then I have to control how it renders. If I'm working on a web project, which I have in the past, I'd have to go in and I have to start changing its rendering properties. And if I only wanted one instance of this control, if I wanted a super text box that's super flashy and does all sorts of stuff, and it's only going to be used in one place in my application, it's a fair amount of work. to have to derive, and then you have to dive through the code and everything like that in order to find out, well, what changes did I make to my control? So it's a quick way to customize these controls. You can do it, you can store the definition of the template in a separate file or right with the control where it's being used. It's up to you, but it's really, really quick and easy to customize controls using templates. So they're useful for many situations. So sometimes what you have is you'll have, let's say, a text box. And a text box has certain properties that you're allowed to change. You're allowed to change what the font looks like and what its background is, and some of the other things, what text is in there. But you're not allowed to do some other stuff. You're not allowed to, let's say, have an image above the text box, or at least you don't have a property made to take an image that would display above your text box, or anything like that. And so again, in order to get these kind of these properties, you would have to derive. But templating will let you set some of this stuff up. And I know it sounds a little washy right now and you don't really understand, but hopefully this will make some sense later. But basically what you can do is you can take a text box and you can move the visual design past what Microsoft wanted you to do with a text box out of the box. You can do that pretty easily with templates. As well, templates are great if you have your text box and you want to take a little bit of a step farther, right? And you want to do it across an entire application. You could also use templating for that just as easily as you can for a single control. So this just reduces the need for having to derive controls constantly. You can use the same text box control with a different template to provide a different layout and visual tree. But your behavior is all the same in the back. So that would be when you use templating, is when you don't need to actually change behaviors or add any extra properties. As well, using triggers in your templates will provide behavior information. This is how your control behaves. And we'll see some of that later. It will become more clear. But you can also embed a lot of behavior control for visual only stuff. So if a mouse is hovering over your object, you can actually set a trigger to say, hey, change my background, change my border, whatever. You can start a storyboard. Storyboards, Visual State Manager, that's outside of the scope of this. But that would be kind of the stuff that you could do with triggers. And again, if you're using MVVM, it's great because you get to store all your visual information in the UI, in the XAML, no having to mess around with your view model to control visibilities or actions or anything like that. So, okay, templates, we've kind of gone over a little bit of an overview of them. Now, how does that affect me? Where do I start? So the first thing that is kind of important to think and remember and know in WPF when you're doing templating is that everything actually has a template. You might not see it right off the bat. If I drop a button onto a form, I'm not, and I'm not messing around with this template. There's still a template there. I don't see it. I'm not being told about it. I don't have to specify it, but it's there. So everything has a default template. All of your buttons, all of your text box, all of your UI elements are going to have a default template. Now, if something has no template, if the template is literally blank, it will not show up anywhere. You won't be able to interact with it because there's going to be no visual tree, which is the visual part, how it's rendered in WPF, for that control. So the template that you apply to that control determines its visual tree. And so if you have no template, you have no control at all. So reading default templates is one of the first things that I tend to do when I'm taking a control. So a lot of times I will have a text box and I will say, okay, well, I like this text box right out of the box. I've dropped it onto my thing. It's just a normal text box, nothing special. I like it, but I want to change something just a little bit. Now, instead of having to go and build the text box's visual tree up from scratch, all I have to do is actually just have to say, hey, well, what's the default template for this text box? And then I'm going to create a copy of that, right? And then I'm going to modify it slightly. And when I do that, I get to start off with what the text box is and go from there. So it can make it a lot easier when you're doing this instead of having to build the visual design from scratch. However, you are allowed to build it from scratch. You can if you want. You can start with the basics and build your way up to your brand new text box if that's what you need. So there's that flexibility. You get to go from both ends. as well assigning default templates. So there's some tricks when it comes to assigning default templates. So when you're assigning a template, you aren't actually ever going to assign, you probably don't want to assign the template when you're doing some of this stuff, unless it's for a one-off control. So well, okay, let's back up here. So when you're dealing with your content templates, sometimes it's a good idea to put them into separate files called resource dictionaries, and we're going to go over that. And so assigning a default template to a control means, well, if I have a new control template that I've created, let's say I have a new template for my button and it's got all sorts of fancy stuff on it, and I want to say apply it to all the buttons in my entire application. I can do that simply by assigning, going to each button and saying, hey, here's your template. Or what I can do is I can set the template in a style that I make global. So if you're familiar with styles, styles allow you to modify existing properties and provide values for those properties for one control or for many controls. And so as you're assigning those properties, you might just assign a template. So sometimes it can be good to put these templates in separate files. And so we're just going to I want to go over later, and I'm going to demo a lot of this, but you should also know how to assign default templates as well as assign specific templates. So, if you're confused as this old man, now's the time we should probably hop into a demo and take a look at default templates. Okay, so we saw default templates. We saw how to make them in Blend. Um, we saw how to pull them out, take a look at them. We saw how to assign them. We saw how to assign to a single control or to multiple controls. So we saw all this kind of great stuff. But now what we've got here is we've got some templates that can be quite large. For example, if you have a complex UI, and then you have a bunch of triggers that you want to put in, sometimes this stuff can really get out of control really quickly, especially when you're making user controls meant to be consumed by other parties. I found that that's really where the difficulty lies, in keeping them small and simple. And so there's 3 ways to extend templates. So I found that if, let's say we have a button, and my button has one content area, and that content is the just what displays on the button. Now, when I'm dealing with the content, I can set it to be a string, in which case the default template is to take a look at the content. In this case, it's going to be a string, and it's going to say, well, a string is not a UI element. I can't render this. I can't ask it for its visual tree. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my default template, which basically says that when there's a string as the content, let's go ahead and throw that in a text block, and set the text block text property to be the content. However, if the content that I've assigned is a text block object, I can actually assign that in my properties, then it knows how to render itself. I'm just going to go ahead and render that. And I'm just going to let it render itself. So we can start to create extra content properties. So I can, for example, well, you might have content on a button. I might say label content if I wanted to build the label into the button control. Or, there's a couple other things that you can do. You could have an image content that takes an image that allows another party to just assign an image. It asks for an image, you can give it an image, and an image appears on the button instead of having to basically set the content to be a UI element that is a grid that includes both text and image, right? So that can make it a little bit easier to deal with that kind of stuff. And so with this custom content, you're probably going to want a custom content template as well. That also has a default. We'll get into that. The next way is template parts. Now, template parts, when you're going with templates, are basically a contract. For example, the scroll viewer control is a good example of this. The scroll viewer control has 2 scroll bars, a vertical and a horizontal, and it also has a grid area where it will display some information, or display a visual tree. Now, basically what happens is the scroll viewer's basic function is to take whatever's in the grid and provide and give that grid a fixed width and a fixed height, right? Or maybe it's not fixed, maybe it's dynamic, but it gives it a width and a height, right? And anything that you put inside the scroll viewer's grid area, if that content exceeds the maximum height, for example, of the scroll viewer that the scroll viewer is allowed, it will wrap that entire content with a vertical scroll bar. You can scroll up and down. Same with horizontal. So that's the kind of basic idea. And so what ends up happening when we take a look at the scroll viewer control is that its template actually has kind of a contract. The scroll viewer has said, well, in order for all this logic to work, I need to be able to talk to the vertical scroll bar. I also need to be able to talk to the horizontal scroll bar, and I need to be able to talk to the grid. So we have 3 template parts, a vertical scroll bar, a horizontal scroll bar, and the grid, that the code behind and the logic used in the scroll viewer will be able to reference. And so what we want to do is, with a template part, we want to say, well, this is the template part, this is its name, and typically it's part, all capitals, underscore, and then the name. That's how we reference something as a template part. And lastly, we'll give it a type. And that's just to be able to verify that we can call methods on a template part. If I have a template part called part underscore super button, but you try to hand me a scroll bar, that's not going to work, because scroll bar and button, there's no relationship, hierarchy, inheritance, connection of any sort. And so we want to just be able to know that when I have a scroll bar as a template part, I'm going to Okay, so this portion of the demo, we're going to go over template composition. Template composition is just important because you want to just make sure that you know how, you want to think about how your templates kind of all fit together and how you can prevent them from getting too large. So I wanted to show you guys first off adding some custom content and content templates and how you can do that using WPF. So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to add a custom control. Now the reason that we want to add a custom control is we're going to add a custom content property. And so the best place to do that is probably in Visual Studio. Now this is one of the great things that Microsoft has done with these tools. Visual Studio and Blend can open up a project. They can open up the same projects. And when they do, they actually are modifying the same project files. So if we save everything here in Blend and we move over to Visual Studio and open that solution, we're going to see the same stuff. We can actually keep them open at the same time, and that's actually what I have right now. I have both Blend and Visual Studio open at the same time. They're talking to the same project, and as long as I save everything before I move from one to the other, the tools will detect changes on the hard drive that were not done by itself. It will refresh this, the solution for you, and then off you go. So I have here my main window. We have got this group box here. And so what I want to do is I want to make a custom group box, and I'm going to have a custom content area. I want to have some more content underneath, outside of the bounds of this group box. And I want to be able to set it from XAML. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go into Visual Studio. Here we are. We're in Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new item. This is just going to be a class. I find that when deriving controls, classes sometimes are the best way to do this. I'm going to call it custom group box. It's going to derive from group box. There we go. We'll add that. There's a snippet that Visual Studio provides dependency properties. So just start typing dependency property, highlight this, hit tab, boom, dependency property. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to specify content. And we're going to make this an object. We can make it anything we want, but we're going to make it an object so that it accepts anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this second content. It's going to be an object on this custom group box. Done. Next. Sorry, not type that out. Type out dependency property. We'll call this second content template property. And this is going to be a control template. There we go. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. We're going to save everything. Now we're going to head back into Blend. And see that it's added here, our custom group box. And now we're actually able to go ahead and use this as a control in our solution. So real quick, I'm just going to head back here, but you can kind of see if you, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if I didn't call attention to it. I guess but when I moved back into Blend, it asked me, hey, you've got a file that was just modified outside of Blend. Do you want to reload that file? And I said yes. And then oh, here we go. The file was actually our CSproj file, and it pulled in this new custom group box control. So we'll head back here. Group box will now become custom group box. Import that definition. There we go. Everything works. And if we build, we're good to go. Okay. So now in order to add the next this custom content that we have, we're going to go ahead. We are going to open. We're going to paste that, and then we're going to access the second content. And now second content, we're just going to make a text block with the text, this is a second content thingy. Close that off. Now you see that it doesn't show, right? We haven't specified yet where this second content should go. And we're going to paste dot second content template, and So now we have this content, but now we need to be able to put it somewhere. So we're going to have a control template, and we're going to have that target our new control. And now in this template, we want to specify at some point where that content is going to be. But for right now, we will just add a grid. There we go. Okay, so we'll save it of that. We'll go back into Blend. Okay, if we view the XAML here, we can see the same code, but still not showing up. So now what we want to do, we're moving back into Blend. Let's start editing these templates. So we edit the template. Now when on the original group box, when we went to edit it, it would actually say edit current, and that's because we had already assigned a template to it, a custom template that we had made. Just happened to be the default, but was considered custom. However, here we can't, and the reason is because custom group box does not have any sort of default template that we've made. This is our new control. So we want to edit a copy. We'll apply this style to everybody, and we're going to throw it in group box templates. You can see here that we have another group box style for the custom group box, but we also have an original for the original group box. We'll just add a little comment here, just kind of split this file up. There we go. Okay. So we have everything's exactly the same, and so what we want to do is we want to change that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another row. Okay, now we have another row. Let's zoom in on here. If you notice, where's our new, we're going to add a border, I mean. There we go. Okay, so now if you see down here, it's a single pixel over here. And the reason is because it's just small, there's nothing in it. We're going to say the grid, we're going to span all the columns, and there are 4 columns, so there we go. And now instead of being 1 pixel, it's 1 pixel tall, but it's all the way across. We're just spanning the entire thing. And now what we're going to say here is we're going to have a content presenter. The content is going to be template bound. If you aren't familiar with what that is, it's really just simply you're binding to the template a property on our stuff. So a property's been passed in to our control called second content. And now what we want to do is we want to grab that and we want to display it somewhere. And so in order to get the value of that, we just template bind within the template. We template bind to the property called second content. We'll close off this content presenter, save everything. We'll go back to our main window, and we see this is a second content thingy outside of the bounds of this border. So we can see now that, whoops, there we go. So that is now the way it goes. If we take out the second content, off it goes. So that is how you kind of can extend this. If your group box, for example, needed some sort of title or needed any sort of extra functionality, you could do it within here. So there we go. This is a second content thingy. Now we want to take our template and we want to use that as well. Sorry, just run around. If we edit the current template, we go back down here. Okay, here's our content presenter. And we can add our content template. Second content template. Boom. And now it will take this content and apply this content template. For right now, though, I mean, the content template is just a grid. But if we wanted to do some crazier stuff to it, we could. But it's just going to apply that template to this content and show it within here, which is within the border, the confines of this border, visual trees being made, blah, 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 crazy stuff. Probably want to dive into that on your own. So that's kind of the first way of being able to make extensible, compositionable templates, is by using these custom templates and custom contents. Now, the way that we can also do it is we can also use template parts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, we're going to wrap this whole thing into a scroll viewer. Boom, here we go. If you aren't already aware of this, you can right click, group into, and now it shows a bunch of these different, I guess, panels almost, layout containers. grid, stack panels, dock panels, canvas, scroll viewer, border, wrap panel, uniform grid, viewbox. All these contain things. They have a content. For example, a grid has a content, and it's just controls how it's laid out within that container. So we grouped it into a scroll viewer, which added a scroll viewer around that control. And this is really great for moving stuff around. You can also right click and you can say change the layout type into any of the other layout types. So if you already have it in a grid, but you want it in a uniform grid, or you want it in a stack panel, or a dock panel, or whatever, you can right click, change the layout type into something else. So that's a pretty neat way, a little blend trick that I've picked up. Okay, so scroll viewer. I wanted to show you guys template parts, and Scroll Viewer has some excellent template parts. So we're going to edit a template, copy. We can apply to all. We'll be setting that within the style later, and I'll show you how to do that. But it's not a group box template. We'll make a new resource dictionary, Scroll Viewer templates, throw it in there. If we view the XAML, we see here that this time it's not added within the style. It's actually added as a control template with a key. Okay, now this key is automatically added over here. But there you go. That's where it automatically adds that. So we've now specified that the template for this scroll viewer should be the one that we've specified over here. So that is the difference between adding a default, which applies to everything at that scope. In this case, we're dealing a lot with the application scope, but you can supply a default template, for example, through a style at a page level, at a control level, at a layout level, pretty much anything where you can go .resources. So there's some extra ability to scope all your templates as well, the default style, but you can scope them. Anyway, so we've got here a control template. Now we see here part underscore scroll content presenter. Now this means this is the naming convention for template parts, and we have a tab here in Blend called parts. And if we go into that, we can see here the scroll viewer has 3 parts. The first is called part underscore horizontal scroll bar, and it's a type of scroll bar. And so what this means is that the logic and everything for the scroll viewer relies on 3 things to happen in the visual part. It's going to, and those 3 things are each a template part. It's going to count on a scroll bar or something just derived from scroll bar being present, and it's counting on its name being part underscore horizontal scroll bar. And so what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to apply logic done in the code behind to our visual elements. So when you're making something, a custom template for something that has template parts, you have to satisfy those template parts, or when the logic behind, the code behind, if it ever goes to try to access those template parts, it will fail if they aren't there and if they aren't in the format that it's expecting. But we can see here the little puzzle piece is the part, and the check mark means, hey man, you're good to go. So that's kind of how you can do that within a scroll viewer. Now, we could change a lot of this stuff, right? And move it around, but that's one of the ways that you can do it. And the way that you would make a template part is to actually put it on as an attribute in our definition. So if we save everything, go over here, reload everything, go into our custom group box. Here's our attribute. Our template part, the name is equal to whatever, and the type is equal to, and now we can say combo box, we can say control, we can say anything that we want, any sort of type. But here we'll say combo box. So this is how you would add a template part to your custom group box. And now you're allowed, basically you're not allowed, but you can start referencing a combo box called whatever, and kind of hope, and you can count on it being there. That would be the naming convention. But we aren't going to do that for this. I just want to show you how it's done, but that would be the way it's done. And so the last way that I was talking about how you compose your templates is, if we go back into Blend here, you can see that each of these is actually just a user control, it's a control. But you can swap these out for user controls. Your controls don't have to be template parts, just that you can't be guaranteed that it's going to be there. But that would be the third way that you could compose your templates, is to use user controls and whatnot within them. So hopefully that gives you an idea of composing templates. We've seen as well a little bit of a way to add and change these things and modify them slightly. And so that's some way that you can start to add some data and extra styles and templates to your controls. Okay, so we've gone over template composition and everything like that, and then we talked about some triggers. So now I just want to show you how triggers work and some of the things that they can do. So a lot of our templates so far have been pretty static. This is the way it is, nothing ever really changes. Triggers, what they can do is they can actually target a specific property and change them based on conditions. So I'd say the best way to do this is to actually let's take a look at some existing triggers in some default templates, and then we'll move on to our own. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add a button. I think button is a great simple control that we can use to take a look at some of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the scroll view. There we go. Okay, sorry. We'll change the layout type into a stack panel just to make sure that we can see everything. So we have our custom group box, and then we have a button here. This button, let's edit that copy of that template. We will add, boom, there we go. We're in here, view the XAML. Okay, so we've got this here is some controls for rendering and whatnot. But we have down here some triggers. Now this is important when we're getting into triggers. This is why we target a specific type, to know what properties are available to us. We've targeted button, and we know that there's property is enabled, there's is checked, is keyboard focused. These things are properties on buttons that we can now target. And so what happens is when we take a look at one of these triggers, we see that there's a property. Now this means this trigger, right, is for this control template. So it says, hey, watch, this is keyboard focused property on the button. And if that value ever turns to true, this is what you do. Go ahead and use the setter. This setter is targeting Chrome. The target name is Chrome. Up here we can see we have a control with the name Chrome. So it's going to target this control here, this button Chrome. And the property render defaulted is going to be set to true. Now this button Chrome, when you're dealing with it, there's all sorts of stuff that this button Chrome does. For example, it handles some mouse rollover events and whatnot. So this button Chrome is already encapsulating a large amount of um, functionality, property changes, and everything like that. Button does not define any parts, so we can see here that the button Chrome isn't quite a part. It's, I guess, a user control within there. So that's how this trigger is going to work. Now you can stack these triggers up, and they resolve in the order that you put them in. So what's going to happen is first going to check for is keyboard focused, and if that's true, it's going to set the rendered defaulted property of button Chrome to true. The next one is going to then resolve, and so we go through the trigger stack and we resolve each one, checking to see if that's applicable and whatnot. Now, if you have two different conditions that modify the same property, it depends on which order you put them in, is how they're going to be rendered. So you get a very fine level of detail and control over this kind of stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do though is we're going to modify this button template to add another trigger to it. First, we're going to run this project. We're going to see, okay, we have a button. Mouse over it. The front text is black, but we kind of have this blue that gets overlaid on the back. Very, very subtle. It's kind of faded in. This is what our button Chrome provides for us out of the box. And so it just allows us to, have a little bit of mouse over so you know that you're mousing over. But in this case, what I want to do is I actually want to change the button's text color to pink when it's on mouse over. So in order to do that, you would turn around and you would create this template, which we've created, and we're going to add a trigger. Now, button has a property called isMouseOver, and this is handled for us by the system. But basically, isMouseOver turns to true when the mouse is over the control. Button Chrome again probably listens to that. We're going to listen to it up here. And so what we're going to say is the foreground of button. Now, because there's no target name here, the default is kind of the current control. So we can actually change the current control. We can change controls within the control template. We can do all sorts of stuff. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, well, when the mouse is over, turn your foreground to pink. Save that. We're going to build it. Build succeeds. Now let's run it. So here we are, same thing. However, when we mouse over, our foreground kind of disappears, but it turns to pink. And so when we leave, because this trigger has said, well, no, isMouseOver is now false, we're just going to let it be the default, and the default is black. So that's how you can quickly add property changes based on things that are happening and some of the properties that are being changed. You can use the control template to listen for new stuff and all that, but that's a little bit more advanced than an introductory to this is. So this is kind of how you would create, this is where you would start to create your custom templates. At least this is where I start. I took a look at my button. I said, I love button. I love the way that it operates. I love the things that it does. The only thing that I wish it could do though is I really wish that text would turn to pink when I mouse over it. So I added a trigger, and now off I go. Now we can replace this button Chrome. We can actually take all the functionality out. Because it's not a template part, we can strip this button Chrome out and turn it into a border instead, and start to specify all of our own behaviors. For example, if I wanted to say, that background, instead of being blue, I want it to be yellow. Well, I can do that a couple different ways. I can take a look at button Chrome. I can see how button Chrome works. I can maybe even modify its own templates. I wouldn't be surprised if I could, I guess there's no template for button Chrome itself, but basically, that's how you would do it. You could pull this out, start add a bunch of triggers down here to make it exactly what you want. And so templating, we can see, gives you very, very good control over the visual tree, how that visual tree is rendered, some of the property changes that you can do to make your control exactly what you want. And that's that look, that feel of the application that you're building. As well, you can use these to encapsulate functionality into user control for distribution to everybody else. So that's going to kind of be the end of this demo. I kind of hope that you took away what you could from my code. If you have any questions, at the end of the presentation, I give some information about how you can contact me. So thank you very much.